Hey everyone, and welcome to What is the Big Idea Week 4. So this week you have a chance to really get into two of the main topics that we want to make sure that at the end of the class that you really feel comfortable, and it's servant and authentic leadership, right? So you read a book on servant leadership, and then there's two articles on authentic leadership, both written by Bill George. The servant leadership by um, by Robert Greenleaf. So Robert Greenleaf was the guy who started servant leadership, right? So this is a famous quote by him that you see a lot, saying, "The servant leader is a servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. The conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. That person is sharply different from the one who is leader first." So this is his theory on how best to lead. So just to give a little background, so Robert Greenleaf was born in Indiana, 1904. He went to the Carleton College in Minnesota. Right after that, he went to work for AT&T, and he worked his way up the corporate ladder. As a matter of fact, he worked there for over 40 years. He did a lot of, once he got into development, he did a lot of research into management, development, and education, putting things together, becoming a better leader. In 1964, he retired from AT&T, and he started the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership. He died in 1990, but the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership is still around today. You can go to greenleaf.org, and they continue to promote kind of his ideals and how he did things. So when you're looking at this, you can see there's a lot of different resources and stores, and there's talks, and there's programs that they have. They're constantly running different programs online, as well as live classes on servant leadership. You can actually subscribe to the newsletter up in the top, and there's a store where you can buy books, and it's all kinds of things. And so I encourage you to when you get a chance to go to that greenleaf.org, poke around a little bit, see some of the things that they're doing, especially if servant leadership is something that you're interested in. A couple other quotes by him: "A leader is one who ventures and takes the risk of going out ahead and showing the way to whom others follows voluntarily, because they are persuaded that the leader's path is the right one for them, probably better than they could devise for themselves." So in a minute, I'm going to show you some characteristics of a servant leadership, and you're going to see in that quote a lot of the things that he talks about show up in that quote right there. And then the other quote is, "Nothing much happens without a dream. For something really great to happen, it takes a really great dream." So if you think about those two quotes, you're going to see a list in a minute of some characteristics, and you'll see where they came from. But I wanted to show you this first, because if you look at the top here on the right-hand side, The Servant is Leader by Robert Greenleaf, that's the book that you read. The Leadership Challenge, which is the one right below it, that's the next and last book that we're going to read in this class. And again, those authors are considered followers of the servant leadership. Simon Sinek, who we watched Start With Why, Ken Blanchard, who you'll talk a little bit more about, but he's written some books. He's really probably the most well-known out of the authors that come out of the servant leadership. And he actually created something called situational leadership that comes out of his thoughts on servant leadership. Give and Take by Adam Grant. We're gonna listen to some stuff by him later on in the semester. Some of the other leaders that are out there. But again, as you can see, there's a lot that goes on about servant leadership. It is still something that is followed to today. So even though he wrote that book a while ago, his theories. So again, he was as he was leaving AT&T, he put all this knowledge that he came together and said, this is the right way to lead. And this is what he was teaching at AT&T. Again, AT&T was one of the biggest companies. As he was working, he was there during the rapid growth. He trained lots of their leaders in what's now called servant leadership. So some of the characteristics of servant leadership. So this is a couple of things that we want to talk about. So first of all is listening. So number one on this list, and listening, again, it's not listening to respond, right? A lot of times we're listening to what somebody says, and we're listening to already know where are they going, or, oh, I know what I want to say, and they want to respond. Listening as a servant leader is listening to understand It's not listening to respond. So you really want to make sure that you're listening to hear what that person is saying, because within that, as a servant leader, you're trying to help a group of people that you're leading by understanding it, where they're going, where they want to go, and if you can help them get there, right? So this is where they are, this is where we want to go. By listening to them, this helps you understand where they're going. So empathy is a really big part of leadership, and I didn't really realize it until I took over a team. I had 12 people. These are people that I knew, right? So I worked side by side with them for a long time, and now all of a sudden I'm leading them, and it was a totally different situation, because now I found out all about the problems that they have at home. I found out about problems that they had. As a matter of fact, one day I had a day, and I'll never forget it. It was a day I was in my office on a Monday, and the phone rings, and it's one of my representatives, and she tells me that she's in tears, and she just got off the phone with her mom, and her mom was just diagnosed with cancer. So we had this long discussion. She lived in one area, her mom lived in another area, how she was going to go back and forth, and how work was going to fit in with that. So we had a long talk about it, and it was just listening to her, understanding where her concerns were, and her concerns were, again, keeping her territory, keeping her job going. How do I do this while my mom is sick? Um, and then understanding. So I hang up from her. About an hour later, phone rings again. It's another one of my representatives whose husband has just been diagnosed with cancer. Totally different kind. And his was stage 4. He was really in a bad place. Um, Again, listening to this person who knew that their life was going to change very, very soon, because there wasn't much that they could do in this time. So again, it was really listening to her, empathizing with her, understanding, trying to hear what it was that why she was telling me. Was I just somebody who she wanted to tell, or was there something that she wanted me to help her with? So it was finding resources that we had as a company at the time to make sure they got to her, make sure that the right people knew, make sure she carried the health insurance, making sure that that everything was right with her health insurance, so that anything that she was going through, we'd be able to help her with. So we got through with that, and then again, a couple hours later, the phone rings. It's another one of my representatives who didn't have children. Parents had already passed away, but her dog had just passed away. And again, it was the same thing. So going through it, listening to her, how can I help her? What was it that she needed? And again, it was a full day, probably one of the heaviest days I had of going through it, and helping each one of those people. And again, the main point about this story is that each person had needs, and each person's needs was important to them. And as the leader, as the servant leader that I wanted to be, I had to listen to each one of what they were, why it was so hard on them, and help them through it, help them go through it. One of the conceptualization, kind of helping them, listening to what it is. How can I help them through it? What is it that I can do for them? How can I, give them the time, get them the resources, the thing like that. So, it's awareness. One of the things that's on here is persuasion, right? So it's not persuading them in the wrong way, but it's understanding that each person is motivated differently. So sometimes you have to think through, how am I going to motivate this person or persuade them? Um, because what happens is we get caught in our head game, right? And we get caught in what our job is or what the situation is for us. And as the leader, sometimes you got to help them move by that. So foresight is one of the things. So right now we're going through this huge pandemic, and I have a team that's home, and they've been home for about 10 weeks. We've been doing stuff, but not nearly what we should be doing. And but I see the light on the other side. That work's going to get back to some sort of normalcy. And again, it's not the same normalcy that we had. That's what they're all looking for, but that's not going to happen. So, I have to have the foresight. I have to sit there and say, okay, how can I now get them to that point? What is it that I can do to say, okay, I need them to be here. I need to get them to understand that it's going to be a difference while we're there. So when we get there, so how do I get them there? So there's part persuasion. It's a lot of foresight. So in this time that we've had off, we've done a lot of training. So a lot of training, but some basic business planning training, right? So it's stuff that maybe they've never done or they haven't had the chance to do in a long time. So right now I have them building two plans. One that's a 30, 60, 90-day plan for when we start getting back out into the field and doing things. The other one is taking a segment of our business and building a plan around them. So they have two plans. So why would that work? Well, the 30, 60, 90-day plan that I have, or have them building, is what's going to get them going. So once things start opening up, they're going to be able to open up that plan, look at it, and say, okay, this is the first thing that I said that I was going to do. This is the second thing that I said I was going to do. This is the third thing, and start getting them going. And then we will be able to transition over to this segmented plan once we get up and going. I don't expect this to hit every point on that 30, 60, 90-day plan, but I need them to build it, because I need them to have benchmarks that they're holding themselves to get them through this. The commitment to the growth of people, right? So one of the biggest things that I love is every year. So, I've left the company that I worked for before. A lot of other representatives have left and they've gone to other companies. I love award season. So we have awards in pharmaceutical and medical device. It's all about the same time. It's, February through April. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to be in a meeting in Nashville this week where we were giving out awards. So we're going to give it away next week for the teams that I'm on. But I get messages from teams that I was on, and that listening to them, all these award winners that I have, and them thanking me, saying, "Hey, what you taught me helped me get me this award, even though they don't work for me anymore." Right? That really makes me feel good. So it's that commitment to the growth of people. One of the things that I always try to do is each person on my team, where are they and what do they need to grow? And growth could be, in a number of different ways. Could it be promotions? Could it be just getting better at their job, getting them recognized by different people, putting them in front of different people? I'm one of those people who I network a lot when I'm at the corporate office, and I'm asking the marketing people to come to Boston to ride with one of my reps, or I'm asking, the training department to be on calls with me. I had the head of strategic planning on with my team today, so that so they could hear what the company does on strategic planning. How can we bring that all the way down to our team? And building a community, right? So I enjoy having this community of people who I've worked with, or this team concept, and that I could take anybody from the team that I have now, or the team that I had before, or the team that I had before, and I could interplay these people, and they would all be able to work together, because they understand. Leadership is a language. We talked about that early in the year. It's also, kind of you build a team language, and I hate to always go back to sports, but if you listen to Bill Belichick, right, he's got a mentality that every person that comes into the Patriots understands when they come in, and they understand what that is, and that's their community. So when you get through authentic servant leadership, one of the other things that we read about was authentic leadership, right? So this was a theory that was taken from Bill George. So Bill George is one of the people who followed Robert Greenleaf, and he took a portion of servant leadership, and he really grew that to be his own. So Bill George was born in Baltimore, Maryland. He went to Georgia Tech. He was an engineer. Then he went to Harvard and got his MBA. His first job was with the Department of Defense. Worked his way up there. Through that, went to work for Honeywell, which in Rhode Island there's a Honeywell factory. And then he went to Littleton Industries. Then finally, he took over as the president and CEO of Medtronic. So he took it over at a time when Medtronic had, it was a big company, but it wasn't the big company that it is now. He invested a lot into R&D. He invested, which is research and development, figured out how to make a lot of the products. Some of the products that he started pushing for are still coming out today. So, he was really kind of an innovator. That engineering background helped him to do that. But along the way, he brought up a lot of people with him, and he created this authentic leadership. He's now teaching back at Harvard. He's a professor of management practices, and he's the Henry B. Arthur Fellow of Ethics at Harvard Business School. So again, you're going to hear some podcasts that he's interviewed in, and I think it's a really good thing. So Robert Greenleaf, who was servant leadership, older, Bill George takes those theories, takes portions of them, and brings them kind of into our time frame. So I think it'll be, and then some of those other books they showed you are the people who are taking it from where Bill George is, and then kind of going on. Your Simon Sinek's, your Adam Grant's, especially Adam Grant. You see a lot of stuff from him now Ken Blanchard in there with, he took another piece and made situational leadership. So they're all taking part of that servant leadership, finding that part that really they held onto and making their own theories out of it. So again, Bill George, written a lot of books, a lot on True North. As a matter of fact, on my bookshelf, I have, just pulled that right out of the ocean. I have a couple of his books because something that I really, kind of like the way he thinks about different things. And I really like his concept of True North. So True North, if it's within a storm, so if it's in a crisis, which is one of his books, Leading in Crisis, or if it's just in your career path, is knowing what that True North is and really going for it. And as you can see by the graphic at the bottom, you have authenticity in the middle, and everything around it kind of builds to that. So what do authentic leaders do? So you're going to hear some similar things to servant leadership. Again, it's part of the theory, so you're going to see it. But it's kind of there's some stuff that I really like that he brings up. So they speak the truth, right? So that's one of the things about being authentic leadership. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. If you have to, sometimes as a leader, it's great when you get to deliver good news, but sometimes you have to also deliver bad news. As a matter of fact, I had to have a conversation with one of my representatives who thought that they were going to be promoted this year into a senior role. And come to find out, just by the time this person was hired, they didn't meet the time frame. So, right, so this person is building themselves up that next week at our, or it would have been this week at the awards meeting, that they were going to be promoted. So I had to have a discussion with them and talk them through why they weren't going to be promoted, right? But I had to speak the truth. Listen, this is where you fell short. It wasn't because you didn't meet your numbers. It wasn't because you don't have the right behaviors. It was because of the time frame of when you were hired to when they measure. Do I think that's a great thing? No. Do I 100% agree with it? No. But it is what it is. So I have to make sure that I have that discussion with them. Then again, going back to leading from the heart, so going back to listening, leading from the heart is how they say it here, is that I had to listen to them. I had to listen to her frustrations of it, and then I had to put it in perspective, and then I had to find other people for her to talk to, not just me, so she could hear it from multiple people so that she could feel better about it. Courageous. They build teams and create communities. So again, you heard that same thing. So building teams, to me, that's a very unique thing. So one of the things, and I might have told the story in the past, but if not, I'm going to tell it again anyways. When I was interviewing for this job, I was with the president of the company, and he asked me a very tough question. His question was, listen, you've been with the same company for 2 decades. How are you going to adapt to the culture that we have here? And I said, I can't adapt to the culture that you have here. What I can do is I can make sure that my team has a culture and so it's building teams. So I'm going to build a team that we have a very rich culture that will complement what you're trying to build here. So that was the discussion that we had. So I know what kind of culture that I want on my team. I know what I want for myself and what I want for my team. So that's the way I kind of put it for them, put it for him, put it to my team, and I let them know this is the way we're going to work. And so my culture is going to be different than maybe some other teams, maybe other teams within the region, but I wanted to be a culture that other people want to be on. Did that in every place that I've been. It's always been successful. It's the culture that I want to build. The dreamers, to me, that's a huge thing that's the foresight. You remember when we talked about foresight with servant leadership, dreamers, the same thing. It's seeing a goal. Okay, if I dream better than what they could do by themselves, and I can dream what that is, and I can start seeing the steps, how can I get them to move to that? And that's what you want to do. So, and another main point that I like about this is they commit to excellence rather than perfection, right? So that's an interesting kind of thing to think about, right? So we all strive to be perfect. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't be. So sometimes 90% is better than not going at all, right? So that's what it means about committing to excellence rather than perfection. If you always shoot for perfection, there's a chance you're never going to make it, and that's going to paralyze you and not get you to move. So committing to excellence rather than perfection, making sure that this is the best that we can do or the best decision we can make for everybody involved. It might not be perfect, but it's the best decision we can make. And then again, leaving a legacy, something that we talked about that I enjoy, the teams that I build. And again, that I get messages from people around my teams in the past, they would love to be on my team again. That's the legacy that I'm building as a team of winners that enjoy working. So I put this slide in there because again, it talks about where does authenticity is part of servant leadership. So if you look at the overall servant leadership, there's a bunch of different theories, and here's some. So these are some, they call it contrasting leadership styles in here, but a lot of these stem from that servant leadership. And you'll see authentic leadership is in there, transformational leadership, transactional leadership, situational leadership, and servant leadership. I'm hoping by the end of the year we talk a little bit more in one of these about situational leadership. I'm going to find a place to put that in because I think situational leadership, that's Ken Blanchard's, is a really good style. I use the situational leadership as my coaching style. So different individuals, competencies, and attitudes require a leader in different styles. So it's something that I do, and hopefully, like I said, we'll get to it. If not, I know you get to it within the leadership program, but I just think it's a good thing. And again, it all stems back from that servant leadership theories. So the last point that I want to bring up is the TED Talk that we're going to watch this week is David Marquette. Very interesting guy. Just the book on the right, The Leadership is Language. He actually just launched that about a week ago, 2 weeks ago maybe. But so the story that you're going to hear about is Turn the Ship Around. So his quote is, "Don't take control and attract followers, give control and create leaders." So we go back to that leadership pyramid, leader, follower, environment. So here you go with, can you turn your followers into leaders, right? So he created an environment that the followers became leaders. So he was serving his crew. So I think it's a really interesting story. I think you guys will like it. I find this one, again, is one of the best ones that are out there. So again, hopefully you enjoy it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put it in the comment box, and I can cover a little bit more in depth next week. All right, have a great week. I'll talk to everyone soon.